Hey there, this is Sarah again. So I just want to go through and show you guys how I make these box paintings from start to finish. This is the newest one that I did. It was actually done earlier today. And like I said, we'll just kind of go through and talk the process out. Probably speed up parts of it where I'm just like dropping in colors. I'm not really saying anything to help shorten up the video a little bit. But so just go ahead and get started then. Alrighty.
Okay, so today I'm going to kind of go through and show how exactly I make some of these, these box drawing paintings, etc. And the techniques that are utilized to get some of those, different pleasant watercolor effects. So first I want to talk about the paper that I use. So personally I use this Fabriano 140 pound 9x12 paper. It's not the best paper, which is what I like about it. So with this paper, we're going to get a lot more water spotting, and the colors are going to not be quite as bold and as brilliant necessarily, except for the ones that we apply at a later stage. So it's kind of nice because you can have some really lovely contrast of the colors that are used, but it's more like an intrinsic property of the paper, so they are not going to be as brilliant all the way through. So you can have some more of that eye appeal, if you will, because of that inherent color contrast in terms of the tones of an individual color that's used. So as far as brushes go, oftentimes I'll only use two brushes for my watercolor paintings of this type. So first and foremost, you need a small to medium round because it's going to, well, it's what I use anyways, to basically draw out the forms that I'm going to later then be painting. So personally, what I've been using right now is this Princeton Aqua Elite. I don't know if you can see that. I love this brush. So it has great absorbency, so it holds a lot of water, a lot of color, and it also has a very nice point on it, which is really important for making those nice crisp lines. So definitely would recommend this particular brush. I've had a couple other ones that I use that I'm not as big of a fan of, so let's see here, like this Raphael precision brush. It's fine, it's a little bent right now because the way I was storing it. It doesn't come to a very nice tip though, and it doesn't have as much absorbency or retention of water and color like the Princeton does. I've also, let's see what else I have that I've used in the past. I do have a Da Vinci brush. This is the Cosmo top. Also, kind of the same issue that I have with the Raphael, so it doesn't hold water nearly as well. It has an okay tip, but it's something that, when we're looking for the best of both worlds, just doesn't quite measure up. So then what I'll also use is this. It's a Raphael soft aqua brush. So this is a round that's really soft, doesn't have much snap to it at all. And it's great because I basically use this as a mop brush, but I have better control over it based on the shape. So I use this when I'm applying more water, more pigment to an area that I later want to fill in with color. Now, if I need to do any fine detail work, I'll use one of these two teeny tiny itty bitty, these are Blick Sables, part of the Master Stroke series. It's that like clearance set or whatever that you get like a whole bunch of these little kind of like sable rejects for 50 or 60 bucks, something like that. And these two are pretty good for holding a decent amount of water given their size, and then I'll use them for if I'm doing some fine fur work or something like that, or if I'm doing some smaller like foliage or those types of things. So those are usually what I have on hand for my brushes, paper. As far as paints go, so I have two really messy palettes that I predominantly draw from. So yeah, it's kind of gross looking, but it gets the job done. So when I'm utilizing paints, predominantly what I will go to are my Daniel Smith paints because their vibrance and color retention are fantastic for the most part. I mean, of course, there are some paints and other brands that I utilize. So like the Winsor Newton Artist Series paints can be pretty darn good. But for the most part, Daniel Smith is the most bang for your buck, if you will. Personally, I don't like to go beyond 4 colors for a given painting because at that point, after that, it can become distracting and can lead to some really nasty mud colors. So that's just a personal preference. I know some people prefer to use more than that and it can look great. I've not personally had that luck. So, just kind of developing your own personal preference for those types of aspects of your painting. So I'll mostly be using this as kind of like my wildlife palette, but I'll be drawing some paints from my bigger palette that I just don't have the capacity to put on this one since it's a smaller palette. Okay, so go ahead and start. So when we're starting, basically what we're doing is we're sketching with water. It's a concept that a lot of people aren't terribly fond of. Watercolor is enough of a turd as it is, and now we're going to go ahead and sketch with it. Well, it's really not that bad. It's mostly just training yourself to have more trust in your hand movements, if you will. So initially when I first started, I would draw the whole thing with water, and became an issue because the drying time would not permit this, to be a particularly viable painting if you wanted to go into any greater detail work. So now what I do is I'll sketch out part of it with water, drop in a really pale pigment like a neutral gray or something along those lines so I can see where my lines are, and then work from there. So this painting that we're doing today, because I'm kind of most associated with is foxes, we're going to be doing a fox, the reference photos from like Pixabay or one of those other free, royalty free websites or whatever. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of jump right in. So using this 6 round Princeton brush, I personally like to start with the back so I can kind of get some linear form, kind of get an idea of where it's going to be on the paper. If I have to go through and basically start over, I'll just use a paper towel to blot out the water that I put down, so no harm, no foul. One of the things that is going to best help if you guys are interested in learning more about how to utilize this technique, sorry if you hear some weird noises. I have a chicken. She lives underneath my little desk here. She's an apartment chicken. She likes to make noise sometimes, so you may hear that. But anyways, all right, so one of the best ways to really help yourself if you're interested in utilizing this technique and kind of branching off from it and developing your own style in association with it, that is going to help you have a better grasp of this, is certainly to just start drawing with a brush, kind of like this, but start off with a pigment. So that way, of course, the way a brush handles is going to vary, differ pretty drastically from how a pencil or marker or what have you, something that's stiff, is going to handle. So I'm just going to drop some neutral-ish color in here so you can better see it. Because your hand, if you haven't done this before, is trained to respond to a certain level of resistance that you'd receive from whatever medium it is that you're applying to the paper. So of course with the brush, you're not going to be able to really hit forcefully or whatnot to have the effects that you would with more traditional drawing mediums. And then of course each brush is a little different on its own, so once you find something that you think would be the brush that you want to use for this, then give it a good workout, get familiar with how it responds to different pressure applications, how it responds to firmer application. More importantly, if you press too hard, then like with this one, if I pressed accidentally really hard, it would just kind of smush out because it's a fairly soft brush. There's not a whole lot of snap to this one either. So just things to think about. things about these is trying to figure out how to fit all onto the paper sometimes, but that's okay. Pro tip, if you're ever making fox artwork, you want to know what's the most important part of the fox? It's always the tail. It's gotta be a fluffy tail. No one wants to look at art. Foxes have ratty little tails. Now I'm doing something that's a little less than ideal, as I'm getting really close to the side of the paper, so to compensate I'm going to have to put something over here to help balance it out a little bit. But we'll get there when we get there. Okay, so we've kind of got our base down. Now, if we're going to be filling parts of this in with water, what we want to do is always go kind of parallel with how things are, in terms of like the body lines and whatnot. So what I'm not going to do up here is make a whole bunch of vertical lines, because that's going to give us, not a nice smooth contour. So I personally always kind of have the same flow that I fill in water with. Now down here I'll go in more vertical strokes, because we're kind of starting to butt up against part of the back of or the front of the thigh and the back side of the forearm. And with the neck, people are always like, your fox's necks are so fluffy, or some people are like, there's white there, whatnot. Yeah, it's all intentional. So what we're doing is promoting contrast, kind of like I was talking about before, but just in a different way. So when we're going and making these, this is where you're going to want to have a vertical approach. You're going to want to intentionally leave white spaces. So what I do, it's not like I plan out where the white spaces go. I just kind of scrub back and forth, and then we'll fill this in here in a second. You'll kind of see the effect it has. So the first color we're using is cadmium orange. I don't want to put the color in really thick, so I'm going through and adding some water to help loosen it out, and that way I can follow where the paper lines are a little bit better. Do a little bit dry brush too, so we can see where these cheek fluffs kind of start and stop and all that jazz. Up here, the problem we're having right now is everything's kind of getting really flat, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and add some fluff on my own. They're just using this nice fine tip round brush to really help get that there. So I intentionally leave a lot of white spaces, and it always kind of contours a body line. So like right here, right along here, always with the toes, so that way you can kind of tell where they are. And that way it doesn't look unnatural. So it wouldn't look normal if I had a big horizontal white stripe right here once I added the pigment. But if it's vertical, your mind is more inclined to be like, oh yeah, that's them. Yeah, that's how it should be. Right, now we're going in with the light red. So I like to use this as one of my darker contrasts. Add some water in here to really help get things moving. I know on the camera it doesn't look like much so far, and it's probably not super helpful, which is unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. It's not a whole lot I can do, unfortunately. Sometimes your lines will dry and you'll just have to paint right on over them, and that's okay. So another thing that's really important is just to notice how fast everything's kind of drying, because adding pigment at different types or different stages of the drying process is going to yield different results. So like right now, this is just getting to the point where I really want to hit hard with some light red, because it's about 40 to 50% dry. So when I add this now, it's going to remain more focal in terms of pigment spread, and that's going to really help drive home that contrast here in areas where I want it. Now I love using indigo for the feet because it has some great retention properties as far as, how the pigment will spread, but it also is going to create some lovely different types of water marking as well, or water spotting rather, which is, a big part of why these paintings can be so eye-catching and still remain true to principles of watercolor as an art medium. It's like that. It's not going to stay like that. You can't really see it too well there. I love it. It's probably going to diffuse and spread and create some really cool watermarking up there. and that's okay with me. With this type of stuff, you really have to, relinquish control and just kind of accept things for how they're going to happen. Of course, you can change some aspects of it if it's going to be a catastrophic failure, or if it's really just rubbing you the wrong way in terms of, not liking how it's looking, and that's okay. But, just like the watercolor medium in general is kind of all about saying, you know what, we're just going to leave this one to fate and see how it goes. So, like that's a little too much. So, what I'm going to do is just come here and I'll use my bigger brush. It's a little bit wet, so it has a little bit of water in there primed, and then we just won't suck it up. Step I'm going to put there is some more light red, because once again that is going to create some lovely effects. Generally speaking, it's not a guaranteed thing by any means, but it's like up here it didn't quite stay as focal as I was hoping it would. That's okay, because there's more. So like this right over here is what I'm talking about, with the way that indigo could really create some lovely spreading, some watermarking, and it's just very appealing in my opinion, and from what I've come to understand, the opinion of other people as well, that is appealing. Move over to the tail, and the tail is the same thing. You're just kind of following the overall, arc of the tail. One of the other colors that I like to use, so right now I'm at 3 colors. You got indigo, light red, cad orange. What is this yellow called? It is, when I think about it, I will specify more specifically what it is. It's this lovely, heavily granulating yellow, and what it does, I got too much black here again, is it can create some really appealing watermarking. So I'll try putting some down there, because that looks like it's at a dry spot that is appropriate for this type of application. Yeah, there we go. So you can't really see it on there. You'll be able to see it more in the close-up of the image, but it's just really pleasant. What the heck is it called though? I don't know. Okay, tail. So tails are more like base gray-ish, so I like to do is mix together light red, and then also some indigo, really thin, to create this kind of pale, warm gray. I'm just going to drop that in as a base. Really liking how this cad orange light red combo is coming through and starting to outline the tail. That's pretty nice. Sometimes I'll do these in one layer, sometimes I'll do them in two. It really just depends on what I'm feeling and how the painting's turning out. So this one might just be one. And what I'll also do sometimes if I'm not super thrilled with how mucky things are getting is, and I want to create a little bit more contrast, just take some paper towel, just go through and help the paper out a little bit, absorb some of that stuff that's causing grief. Sometimes I'll cheat a little bit at the end too and use some gel pen to really help get some of the whites back that are lost. And it works pretty darn well. So I'm gonna start working on some of the background too. So in the spirit of being really creative, I'm just gonna basically follow what's present on the reference image. So this little dude's standing on a fallen tree. So one of the things that'll help with continuity of your piece and making things look more natural is certainly to, like down here where there's still paint present in the foot, just take that paint and bring it into whatever's underneath it, because that is really going to help make it look a little bit more natural, if you will. Some things I'm going to change for this though. We're going to give this tree some branches. Fallen log type deal. So basically using the same principles that were applied for making this. You're going to put down our water layer first and then branch. Mr. Fox is going to have to struggle to clamber over. Everything's in the way, so I can't quite get to it. Now, if you're familiar with complementary colors, you'll know that orange and blue are complementary colors and therefore are going to interact more favorably when in the same piece together. I'm just touching up some spots over here that I'd like to address. This needs a little bit of work still. Take some, do I want cadmium orange? I do. Got it balanced out. There's a lot of cad orange up here. So for this piece, I'm going to have some back here as well to help make things a little more evenly distributed. As the camera angle is not the best for fully seeing this now, so if that helps at all. Not really. This is where we're at so far. Okay, so my favorite blue is Prussian blue. It works wonderfully with the colors that I like to utilize for these pieces. It has some lovely, lovely, lovely watermarking and is just extremely vibrant. Usually it spreads pretty well too. Of course, I like the Daniel Smith Prussian blue the most because that's my go-to brand, but everyone's certainly encouraged to find their own special color or combination for whatever it is they're painting, whether it's this type of stuff or something else. I'm gonna do another brand. Now, because we don't want this to just be a blue tree, we want to bring down some of the colors that were used up here into our piece or part of the painting below. I'm just going to drop in some of this nice light red, put it under the foot there. Down here along the bottom, we're just going to actually turn this into another broken branch. Another color that is fabulous for this part that I still can't remember the name of is the yellow that was used. Actually, I'm going to put some of that yellow right there. So you'll see just how splendid it is once it interacts with this Prussian blue. It creates this lovely green. I realize it's kind of false advertising to say that I only use 4 colors. I use 4 colors for the fox. I'll expand a little bit when making the background. Hopefully that makes some sense. I'm gonna bring this over here. So something I see people doing often with trees that they may find, they're like, why can't I make trees that really look good? Or something just seems off about them, I don't know why. And I apologize, this is like super common sense and everyone knows this and I'm just talking to the wind. But if you look at your tree, your base is always going to be the widest. As you go up, it's going to taper, but it's not going to be a dramatic taper. So let me see here. And my paintbrushes. Just look at trees, basically. And then notice, just really how they taper, how their branches aren't just straight sticks coming off. They're always angles, and notice that the branches will taper too. So just some thoughts. Okay, now with those, I want to put some blue in there. Really help contrast with the orange. Now going back to our fox real quick, it's still really wet right here. So what I'm going to do is kind of take an opportunity, see if I can do something with that that'll look cool. It might not, and it might look awful, or like nothing really happens there, but let me just see. You can't really see it too well in the feed, but it is getting lighter. Now I got a lot of water out of there. I'm gonna add some in. dry point down here. I can kind of add some water to get some hopefully cool effects. Let's see, I'm gonna drop in a little bit of that. I think this is quinacridone gold. Pretty sure that's what it is that I've been struggling with to name for the past 20 minutes. I could be wrong. I got a couple blotchy blobs up here, and I'm going to take those and turn them into other parts of the background, so that way it's kind of like a cover up. So I'll go through and make a few passes over the areas that I really want to make darker. So mostly just the feet parts of the legs, that kind of stuff. Got sunny out. Okay, so this is basically it. Just gotta sign it and then be good to go.